welcome to episode 31 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slowinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week, we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. Show note, from here on out, we've got a guest nearly every week of the show going into the new year. We will be doing reader mail and what's going on at the studio, so if you've got questions or want to hear more about something that we talk about in the show in more detail, or you want it explored, send us an email. That's contact@bithellgames.com. That's contact@bithellgames.com. This week's guest, and I'm guaranteed to butcher his name, is Romain de Waubert de Genlis. Go ahead, Romain. Just say it.
Yeah, well, Romain. That will be much easier.
Okay. Say your name so that everyone can hear it. What it actually is.
So you can all butcher it.
Yeah.
So I'm Romain de Waubert de Genlis.
Oh, it's so good. It's so beautiful. Say it one more time.
I can pronounce it. Yay. Waubert de Genlis.
Okay. So he's the creative director and COO of Amplitude Games, creators of the Endless series. Now, for a quick background on the studio, Amplitude is... You're still in Paris, France?
Yes, we still are.
Cool. So they're a Paris, France-based developer of 4X space strategy game Endless Space, which was made in 2012. Then in 2014, they released 4X fantasy strategy game Endless Legend, and the very indie tower defense game Dungeon of the Endless. We will definitely be talking more about that. They are currently working on Endless Space 2, which is published by Sega, who recently acquired the studio, and Amplitude fits really nicely into that Sega portfolio of having a Total War developer, Creative Assembly in there. They also did Alien Isolation, and Relic Entertainment, who does the Warhammer 40K Dawn of War series and the Company of Heroes thing. So, yeah, you've been on a roller coaster. So before you went to and founded, did you found Amplitude? Are you one of the founders?
I'm one of the founders. Basically, we were two co-founders at the beginning with Mathieu Girard, who's my associate, and we're just basically two guys who were at Ubisoft and left to create Amplitude. And then we've been joined by some, of our previous teams to grow the ranks. So, yeah, we could say we're even 6-7 co-founders.
So you were at DICE as a designer for a few years, and then Ubisoft as a producer for seven years?
I think so, yeah, sounds like it.
So give us a bit of background there, because one of the things that comes up pretty often on the show is folks like to know the path, because we constantly see this idea of people suddenly become famous overnight.
It's totally how it happens.
And it's totally how it happens. And that's really not how things happen. So go ahead and give us a little background, just so people can follow your path.
Okay. So for me, I started more or less in 98-ish. Basically, I always wanted to be a game designer. First, for board games. Then, I realized it would be so much more fun, make it on computers. So went on that, but realized, you had no studies to make video games. So what should I study to make the video games I wanted to make? So I decided to do computer science. Learned how to program to make my games myself without anyone else, so I could basically do my dream games. Then by doing that, actually, I realized there were more people around me who wanted to do the same. So I created a group of today would be kind of an indie group, but not really a studio, and we started to get a bit of funding to make our first game, which was a fantasy strategy game, actually a kind of Civilization-esque game, which is more or less the ancestor of Endless Legend. And at the time, so 98, we wanted to sell it to Cryo Interactive. I don't know if you remember the guys. They were based in Paris, France, with Philip Ulrich being the leader of the studio. And actually, they decided to go bankrupt at the time. So we all had to stop making that amazing game. But based on the game design, on tech docs, on actual technology actually we developed, we were all hired in other studios. Whether this is at Ubisoft, and for me was actually at the time was Refraction Games, which was a small.
So did you break up and go to the different places, or
we all broke up? No, we had to all look at someone who could pay for us basically individually. And we needed to earn some money finally. So basically it was really hard to find a job as a game designer simply because it did not exist. I mean, you were a game designer, but as someone who was really part of the team as someone else's. You were a programmer and you had a game idea and you were the game designer of that project. You were an artist, and had a game design idea and you were becoming the designer of the game. But you always had another job first before to be a game designer. But to come and say, hey guys, can you hire me? And I want to be a game designer. Really, that did not exist. And I was really, really depressed to find that out at the time. And so 98, 9-ish, maybe 2000 by the time. And until I found a weird announcement. It was an online magazine. I don't know which one it was, but something like, I don't know, before I can spot whatever. And they never put any news about game jobs. And there was this one job saying like Refraction Games based in Sweden is looking for a game designer, which I've never seen that before. So I just went straight on that. And actually it was so small indie studio. They did Codename Eagle before that. And they wanted to make a multiplayer game. It was a shooter only multiplayer, which was very ballsy at the time. And just when they hired me based on my game design that I did for what would be the ancestor of Endless Legend, and then started working on the game design of that game, which was called Battlefield at the time, and it was just before Refraction was merged with DICE basically, and so that's where we did Battlefield 1. So as basically become lead designer on that. Well, we were not that many designers, so it was not complicated to be lead designer at the time. And then, went on to Battlefield 2 with them. And basically, after a while, I realized I would be spending my whole life doing Battlefield games. So I had to look at something else. Being a game designer is great, but it's great to do a lot of different things. Especially, so I wanted to learn other things as well. So, and then I realized, back in Paris, there could be some jobs, but as producers, and I wanted to keep working with independent developers. So I was independent first, then joined this indie developers, and being a third-party game of EA, I realized all the difficulties that you had as the small indie developers, basically. So that's why I wanted to be a producer on the other side and to be able to help small studios to make their dream games, basically. And that's why I joined Ubisoft as producer on third parties and only working with external studios. So working with Arcane Studios, working with Capybara Games, Black Hole, a lot of amazing studios. I was very happy to work with them.
Did you do Clash of Heroes? Wait, did you produce Clash of Heroes?
Yes.
Oh, I love that game.
It's amazing. It's the same. We are like 3 or 4 guys here actually who worked on the title, and still is one of the best memories we have in game development. So we regularly talk about it.
That's how I met Nathan the first time. I really love that game, and it was E3 or something like that, and he was showing it. And then we just got to talking, and he's just like, oh, no, I actually run the studio. And then we just sort of went from there.
So anyway, so that's basically it. And then after that, I realized my dream games were still, the games I wanted to start with which were, strategy games, 4X strategy games. We realized at the time also that nobody was doing a really big competitor for Civilization games, basically, and they were selling crazy. I mean, already at the time, Civilization was 4, I think, was more than 2 million pieces, maybe 3 million pieces with add-ons and repacks. It was huge, but nobody talked about that, So and I was seeing the data, and data was good, But when you were talking about 4Xs, making 4Xs, like publishers were looking at you, they say, please, no, there's something else, no, not as nerdish, or if not nerdish, if it's a bigger audience. So, and it's true. And looking at the games being made in the genre, most of the time, you had quite a few good games already in the 4X genres that were indie, small, but most of the time, they were really not accessible. They were more like programmers' game for programmers, more or less. It was like kind of Excel sheet games. And the idea was, okay, how could we, use what we learn in making AAA games? And isn't there some techniques that actually are not so expensive that could be adapted to 4X games and that could, widen a bit the genre, like attract more people to it, make them more accessible. Especially accessibility was something like we wanted to work a lot on because, it's not because you're making strategy games that, you have to have 10 menus to be able to add a +1 to something, it's not what the game should be all about, because when you play these games, actually, you forget, you fiddle with numbers, it's all about the story you're going to live, basically, and that's fantasy creating around you. So our starting point was, okay, we should make these games, but focus on creating the fantasy and all the tools that will contribute to that. And saying that in many ways, actually, not a lot of people were contributing to that in the genre. We kind of were, when pitching that around us, nobody was interested. So we said we will do it, and we're lucky enough to have very good contact with our team to ask them, if we were published, on their platform, no problem, make the games you want, we'll be there. So we decided to leave, make our games very quickly. So our previous team, all our leads joined us and to make the games. And that's it. That's all. It all started, and we're lucky enough that when we arrived and with Endless Space 1, so we had very little money to make it, because again, nobody was very keen in putting money in it. But at least we focused a lot on the accessibility and as much as we could on the universe, building something that was more than strategy. And strategy side, actually, we're a bit afraid to not be able to deliver on that side, because they are complex games, and it's great to say it's going to be a 4X game about experience, but if you fail on the strategic side, you players will not follow you, and they will not even care about the experience you offer. So that's why we decided to create the Games Together platform, to be able to attract around us, some of the best, 4X players, so they could actually help us actually in reaching the depth, wanted to reach in strategy. So and that was our best answer on that side, basically, to how could we make sure it's deep. Well, basically our players will tell us how deep it is, and if it's worth it or what we should do to make it deeper. So that's how it all started.
I'm interested in why 4X. I mean, that's the thing. It's such, as a developer, it terrifies me, the idea of trying to make one, just because they're so massive and so complex. What was it? Was it that challenge that made it exciting, or was it just something that you had always wanted to do? It doesn't seem like the obvious easy choice, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, I think to make the easy choice at the time would have mean we would have made a Facebook game. Everyone was asking for a Facebook game.
I was doing those as well. Yeah.
so
the glamorous world of Facebook games. Yeah, I remember when that was the thing. That was good.
So basically, no. But okay, it was definitely a passion choice, and it's hard to be really good at justifying yourself when it's a passion decision. So it's true. Okay, we were definitely crazy about the genre, but and that's linked to the reason. The thing is, we were waiting for the next big 4X to arrive, and more or less, to make it simple, we had to wait every 5 years to have one, which was more or less the next civilization, and in between the wait was long, basically. So we wanted to like stop waiting, basically, and just do it ourselves, and at the same time we could address that and that we didn't like, and again, so this whole experience and accessibility thing. So after a while, and you have to start believing that you're not the only one to be waiting for that kind of games, and especially when again you were looking at the data and you were saying that these games were actually selling a lot, not just a little.
Well, is that what you found, that investors were interested once you had prototypes going of this 4X strategy game, or was it still an uphill battle in getting interest, and it wasn't until Endless Space was out there and it started doing its thing that you were legitimized essentially?
Well, actually, even after no, so definitely until we shipped Endless Space, no investors were really interested in that. Really, not at all. Even after shipping it, actually, we did huge sales on the game, so we over the 1 million copies sold, and for indie developers, quite huge. But at the same time, it went, over time. It was not, in 1 month, 1 million copies. So even for investors, they always think, oh, it's gonna stop now. It's gonna be 2 more months of selling games, and that's it, And they didn't prove they can make another one, So to be able to prove anything, you definitely have to make more than one, because they always believe, at best, you are lucky, and that's it. So no, and before that, until the last minute, all people were saying it was a nerdish genre, and definitely niche.
Well, speaking of nerdish genres, so I'm a massive Dungeon of the Endless fan. So for those who don't know, it's a tower defense dungeon crawler that has a cast of interesting characters and a resource system that is fairly intuitive in terms of resource management. And I've played that game with a group of my friends several times, and it's a really methodical multi-hour co-op experience. And I'm fascinated by the juxtaposition of having a sprawling epic like Endless Legend, and then a very methodical experience like Dungeon of the Endless. And how does something like that even come about in a studio? Because we're struggling. I mean, we're not struggling. We're doing really well in focusing on one idea. And we've talked about hey, if things go really well, we'll have we'll have 2 teams and they're doing 2 separate things and exploring that. But a Dungeon of the Endless, you were doing Endless Legend at the time. How does something like that even come about? And then how do you keep focus on both projects?
Honestly, it was a bit hellish at the end. It was not supposed to happen that way. So normally, Dungeon of the Endless should have been done much before. So we would have had a lot of time to first focus on one and then focus on the other. To have the 2 shipping at the same time was really, really bad. Actually, I couldn't tell you which one shipped first. Actually, even for me, it was just one big blur of shipping games. So anyway, we had a smaller team on Endless Legend, on Dungeon of the Endless, and a bigger team on Endless Legend. The original idea with Dungeon of the Endless was to find a way to explain in a fun way to our players the link between a space game, a sci-fi space game, basically, so Endless Space, and Endless Legend, which was a fantasy game, like a medieval type of game. So totally different genres, yet set in the same universe. And so basically it all came out, in the night, drinking way too much. Basically, that's how we came up with the concept of Dungeon of the Endless. At the time, we were playing a lot of roguelikes. It was right in the midst of the craziness, that we had at the time with a roguelike coming out every day, and basically being drunk, we're just all discussing how we would make it better, different. How would be our dream rogue game, and how would it look like, blah blah blah. So, and the thing is it was we often have these kind of discussions, but most of the time, that after you forgot, the difference was that, it was a Friday night. So by the Monday, following that, everyone came up with a piece of the puzzle. Some, wrote down game design, other, had a prototype that it worked on the weekends. The idea stuck to us basically. And 2 days later, we're presenting that to my associate, Mathieu, and saying, okay, dude, we have to make this game. It's going to be really fun. No worries, it will take just a couple months. It will be cheap, and it will be awesome. So it took 18 months, and definitely was not cheap and whatever. So it was a big failure in that sense. But it was awesome, because the thing is, the more we're developing it, the more we're falling in love with it, and the more we want to add and make more. And and then we had a vote asking the guys, okay, what do you want? You want to see a console version of the game? You want to see a multiplayer on the game? Of course, they all voted multiplayer. Again, told Mathieu, don't worry, we'll just take a month and it will be easy. And it took I don't know, maybe 10 more months to have multiplayer working correctly, and plus it was hell again, with the other versions. So anyway, but it was then awesome, the kind of evening you're describing with your friends playing the game, for us was actually part of the initial concept. We wanted to be able to play this roguelike, with friends, that was the whole idea, and not doing it, would have been really, really, really sad.
I mean, would you allow that type of split focus to happen now, or now that you're on this sort of path? Is it endless space? Is it endless space 2, and then the big thing that comes after that, and the big thing that comes after that, or is there still that divergent path that can occur?
So we always have smaller projects, so smaller teams, smaller projects. We need that, actually. We need that because it kind of feeds us with different ideas, point of views, things. And there's a lot of things, actually, we use back and forth. Some idea from small games that, we use on the bigger game, and actually vice versa. Personally, actually, if that's just me and the way I work, is if I only work on one thing, I don't know, kind of wither, kind of like a flower, I just I just kind of slowly die basically, and I need to have a stimulation. And I think it's the same for many members of the team, to have this different point of view, different things, and the way time works on the smaller projects is very different, because you can see results much quicker. It's very rewarding. So when on a bigger project, from the time you write a design document and the time you see it working in game, you can sometimes wait for a year, 6 months. It could take a long time, and it's definitely not the same on the game like Dungeon, basically. So it's refreshing, and basically we keep doing that. Doesn't mean they all ship. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, but doesn't mean that you didn't learn something. It doesn't mean that even if it didn't ship, that you didn't actually use some of these elements that you designed, created, you prototyped in the bigger games that you are making, actually, or actually what we had in the past. And actually it's also giving birth to another game, which could be bigger or the same scale but different. It's true that on the bigger game you don't have that agility as much, like to be able to say, oh, never mind, we'll just kill it, we'll just restart it, we'll do something else. You can't do that. It's you have to keep moving in the same direction, or else you just kill the studio. But so no, it's something that definitely we need, and we want to have in the studio.
So speaking of the studio and going forward and all that stuff, Sega. I'm intrigued. That was brilliant news. Congratulations. Thank you. I'm interested in the whole process of that relationship, how it moved from a publishing relationship to maybe something more. I want to know the whole story. I want to tell me like you're telling the story of how you met your partner to your kids later down the road. Tell me the whole thing.
It's a huge story, dude. So I'm not sure we'll be able to cover all that. But anyway, if I speak too much, you just cut me off. So the whole thing is, it all started by all these games we're making. We're getting more and more ambitious. We know that in order to be able to feed our ambitions, we need more more power behind us in two aspects. First, we need more money to make these games. To have more money to make these games, you need to reach more people to make these games, so you have more people buying your games. We are reaching a point where as indie developers, 4X indie developers, we believed we reached our audience, and we really had troubles going beyond that. So either we were keeping our ambitions at the same level and not trying to make better, or always go beyond what we're able to do. But honestly, this is frustrating, especially on the creative side, to say just do more or less of the same, and just we won't call it a 1.2, but we'll call it a 2, and that's okay. Or you really want to do more of that, and to do that you need to make piece of game, throw pieces, a bit like on the smaller games, it's not the whole game you throw away, but just a piece, and if you look at Endless Space 2, we're like discussing that with the designers the other day, but I think most of the big elements of the game have been like redesigned 2 or 3 times and redone 2 or 3 times, which is it's ambitious, and that allows you to reach a point where your game is different, it's bigger, it's more variety in terms of strategies that you can reach. So the question was, could we stay independent and do that? The quick answer was no. Looking at the fact that not only that, but we had troubles reaching. If you look at Asia, in Asia, just for us, it's like on the map we have like a black hole for Asia, and
Sure.
and you keep reading articles saying how China and all these territories are just the future. Then
that's what we're exploring right now. I mean, we're on that path right now. We've got volume coming out in Japan very shortly, and we're absolutely looking at the Asian markets as well. So we were in a very similar situation there. And
the thing is for us, we had no idea how to reach that. So I don't know how you will be able to reach that, but for us, we had no idea how to do it. So then, you could look at partners, publishing partners, and then, when you start computing, numbers about publishing, you realize actually, it will more or less actually just be more efforts to actually not be able to gather more funding, just by the way the partnership works. So you're just like, what's the point then? And then very quickly you realize that the only way to do it is to find actually a partner that, wants to incorporate you to its house, and that will fight for you as it will fight for any of these other games, and that's it. So basically, and their money will be your money, and vice versa, and so it will be much easier. And then together you can be very ambitious about how you're going to make your games. And then we started to look around for who would be that partner. And actually, Sega was one of the first one to actually reach us. Actually, at the same time as they reached us, we were still in the process of that rezoning, and we didn't make it through completely. But we had them, and we had a few very big other publishers or big companies reaching to us and saying, we love what you are making, we love that your games together, your games, or for some others just the numbers you make, but we don't care about the games. And so basically, it's different point of views each time. Sure. But it was interesting to realize actually that for the first time in our history at Amplitude, actually a lot of people were coming to see us and say, well, now we are interested by what you do, and together we can do good things. So that kind of fed that our thinking process on this partnership thing, and that's it. And with Sega, it was more or less very quickly the only one we wanted to work with, because it was really on how they work and how they actually function. Mm-hmm. That really fits who we are. So the idea is, if you look at all the studios that they have, first of all, it's stupid, but personally I'm a huge fan of Total War. I mean, since the very first one, and I've always played them all, and way too much, and love how they work with the publishing side of Sega, and discussing with them basically they are extremely independent. It's more or less the development, that leads, basically, and the publishing house that supports. That's what we're looking for, basically, a house that will support us and push us as much as we can, and basically and teach us to do things we don't know how to do, because selling is not our job. I mean, we did what we could, but it's not what we know how to do. So, and that's their job. And in that aspect, they basically, what they offered is to give us all the support, they could, without telling us what games to make, because all they want us to do is to keep making the games we make and the way we make them. They love the games together. They love, the way to work with the community, and the fact that we do 4X, it's strategy. So they have more strategy titles, but it's 4X. It's not the same as what they do with Relic or Total War. So it's it was amazing match basically for us. So and somewhere, we're hoping that if we wanted to reduce that black hole in Asia, they would definitely could be a good choice there. So yet, our style of game is still very Western type of game, so we'll see. But we had a huge uproar on our forums from Chinese players actually complaining that we were not translating the game in Chinese. So well, maybe we'll be compliant. We'll see.
Well, thank you so much for being on the episode, Romain. Roman.
Thank you very much.
Romain.
Forget the end.
Forget the end. Move on from the end. That's what's tripping you up.
Romain.
It was
now I just made it Rome.
That had like a V at the start.
I'm just terrible at this. Thank you so much for being on this episode, and hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
And now it's time for what's going on at the studio. We're in the middle of getting together a vertical slice.
Vertical slice. It sounds like either an attack in a fighting game or a specific cake that they're asked to make in Bake Off. I can't
Vertical slice.
And today we're going to be making a vertical slice with clotted cream and strawberries.
Avoid the soggy bottoms. So what is a vertical slice? Yeah, let's just start there. Mike, what is a vertical slice?
It's a load of nonsense, Alexander. That's what it is. No, a vertical slice is, as the name suggests, basically you create in your head an imaginary completed game, and then you create a slice of it. The idea is, though, that that slice of gameplay is representative of how that slice of gameplay would be in the final game. Usually it's like 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and it is a truthful, honest depiction of what you expect the entire game to be. It's a way of everyone checking in and making sure that everyone's pulling in the same direction, but there are downsides to it as well. And when those vertical slices make it out into the wild as demos, it can often cause some controversy as well. So
what is the good, honest version of a vertical slice? Because as you have said, when vertical slices can get out into the wild and they have nothing to do with what the game actually is that eventually ships to people, it causes drama. But in this specific, so for example, in our specific case, our vertical slice is a post prototype. Where does it usually fit in? Because I can see how a vertical slice could be used to actually pitch a publisher as well, or is that not?
You wouldn't normally. I mean, that would be because it's very expensive. A vertical slice. You have to have achieved everything from the audio to the visual to everything to a level that is satisfactorily kind of representative of the final game. So it's a bit too big usually for a pitch. It might be that that you would have a deal with a publisher that they funded you to vertical slice and then made a decision if they wanted to keep funding you, something like that potentially. But no, I think at the point where you're doing vertical slice, the key thing for a vertical slice, it's about finding an agreement between everyone of what's this game actually going to be. Because there is a problem with game development, you pitch a game, you produce a bunch of concept art, a bunch of materials about the design, about ideas of how things are going to work. You make a prototype, but at that stage, people on the team, probably have different images in their head of what the final thing is going to be, in terms of how it looks, in terms of how it plays, in terms of how it sounds. So a vertical slice is meant to function as kind of a check-in, basically, to make sure, okay, we all agree on what this is. Now, obviously,
So is it for people who don't read game design documents?
No, it's for people who understand the game design documents are like 10% of what the actual game design will end up being. No, it's the reality is, if you look at a movie script,
I'm saying, like, is it the YouTube version of an article, right? Like, is it?
No, it's imagine a movie script. And imagine, you've got a movie script, De Niro's going to be playing the main character, that it's going to be directed by Spielberg, that it's targeting a family audience, right? In your head already, images start swirling of what's that movie look like, how's it feel, what's the vibe of it. The problem is, I might be talking about De Niro, when he's working for Scorsese, as opposed to his current kind of comedic thing. I might be talking about the Spielberg who directed Munich rather than the Spielberg who directed E.T.
I have a really good example.
Lots of variety in terms of what we might mean. So we might have different images in our heads. Go on, give me an example.
The Josh Hartnett scene in Sin City. That was recorded, I believe. It
was made beforehand as part of I think that was as a pitch, but yes.
Yeah.
That in that scene, it establishes the look of the movie, it establishes the sound of the music, the vibe of the movie. You know what that movie is from that one scene. And that's what a vertical slice is there to do, is to act as it's a way of a publisher checking that the team's on the right track. It's a way of the developers you can check your pipelines. So pipeline in game development is the process of, like, I want there to be a gun in the game. There's a gun in the game. It's all the steps that are required to get that going. So it's the concept artist, the designer, the coder, the 3D artist, the animator, the effects artist, the designer, all of these roles that come in to get a gun into the game. That's called a pipeline. So that's your process. So any element of a game you can kind of almost chart or map out, like, this is the process we have to go through. And vertical slices often are used as a way of kind of rehearsing that process, because you're actually going to have to make 30 guns, but making one gun all the way through will signpost to you, okay, so we need to rethink how we're doing this, or this bit of the process takes longer than we expected it to, or these are the ways we can streamline this. So it's useful in that regard that you can test it. But the kind of one of the most important things with vertical slices that I think often is missed is that they are useless, in terms of usually they're not used for the final game. And this is the problem when they're demonstrated to kind of the general public, and the general public goes, well, this is way more visually interesting, or way more high tech than the game that released, or they've removed all these things. And of course, in game development, you do that. You change things, you tweak things, you work out stuff. And a vertical slice probably has more time spent on it than any other 20 minutes of any of the rest of the game as well. So it's not fully indicative of what the final game is, but it is a very good way of kind of marking in the sand where you are and what you're trying to achieve.
So how does a vertical slice go wrong? If a vertical slice is supposed to be, I guess, the target of what the final game is supposed to be like, why does it go? Does it go wrong because it's trying to impress specific people, or what is? Well, I
don't think it goes wrong in the way you're describing. It's not meant to be a depiction. I mean, in an ideal world it would be, but it's not designed to say this is what the final game is. It's more, think of it more as, this is what we currently think the final game should be. What goes wrong from an outside perspective is that then, of course, the publisher goes, nah, we think this is a bit too brown, it needs more colour, or the designers go, well, we kind of realised when we made that vertical slice that this mechanic isn't that interesting, or and it becomes point of conversation where everyone involved, or the coders are like, you can't put that many animations on screen, you'll destroy the whole game. We have to pull this back. So it's a point where everyone makes the game they think they're making, and then realizes, okay, that's not working, or that we love and we need to focus on that. So it's very much, as with all things in development, it's a very temporarily locked thing. It's not, this is what we're going to make, it's what we think we're making at that point, and the conversation continues. So to use an example, if we made a vertical slice of an action game and then we were silly enough to share that with the public, that public then is not aware of the fact that then we looked at that build ourselves and went, it's too violent, we need to pull that down, and it's a bit too garish with the colors, let's pull those back just a little bit, and that chainsaw is boring, let's remove that altogether.
So you're censoring the experience.
You're creating, as a team, you're working out the best game you can make, or the best game you think you can make, and that's those reasons are not always what's the most fun for the end user. Sometimes they are to do with the game actually running, or we don't have enough money to make that many animations, or these kind of things. So it's only wrong if it's viewed from the outside. I would suggest that it's more of as with all things, it's a part of a process. Where it's frustrating and where kind of it can be a challenging thing to do for a small team is they're very expensive. You have to spend a lot of money on a vertical slice because you have to basically be building stuff that's final. So it's it can feel a bit like wasted work. But
is it like the classic sort of? I actually haven't heard this one in a while, but the classic sort of example is: do you want us working on a demo, or do you want us finishing the game?
Yeah, and to be fair, you can very easily consider a build that you would take to an E3 or a demo like that as this is a vertical slice. It is functionally a vertical slice. Usually, an E3 demo or something like that actually is going to be further in the process, so it would be something where everyone's a bit more certain of what the game's going to be. If you're putting out if you've got a playable demo a year before release, you've probably made your first vertical slice a year or so earlier. Like it's further along in the process. But yeah, it takes you away from building the game. But to be honest, that can also be a really good thing, because it can, if you as I said, you're rehearsing some of these processes, and you're finding out, well, actually we need to completely rethink the way we're building stuff. And often, it's something I know comes up with us quite a bit when we're talking, where you'll be I'm going to keep this vague because obviously we don't want to reveal exactly what we're making, but like you'll come to me and you'll say, well, that thing that we've discussed and neither of us likes, why is that still in the game? I don't care about all this pretty artwork you've been adding. Why are we not fixing the thing that's a problem? To which my response is, well, I need to get all that pretty stuff in because I need to find out if like that pretty stuff is going to even bloody work. I know how to fix that problem, so that problem is further down the list of once we know if this big thing over here that costs us a lot of money actually will work. It's that thing, it's that prioritization, because as a developer, as a designer, you always want to be working on let's make this game brilliant all over the place, but sometimes you do have to just spend an example is about like 2 weeks ago I just had to spend 3 days getting some really specific animation into the game, which was in no way helping the game to feel any better and to solve all the problems we were trying to solve at that stage of development. But I had to work out the maths of making that animation actually work in the game, so we sort of had to do it to that point. Otherwise, we would have an animator twiddling their thumbs waiting for us. So that's what vertical slices are to a greater extent, is that's just everything being done at the same time to get something to that level.
And now it's time for reader mail. And now it's time for something. And now it's time. I gotta find something else to say when I say that. And now it's time.
I'm disappointed you've given up on the singing. I'm gonna start doing I'm just gonna take like Hamilton tunes and rewrite lyrics and just do the whole thing.
Maybe a reader can just send me a list of music genre types, and then I just have to go down that list every single week and do them in order. So, one is techno, the next one is jazz, and then I'll just have to do the reader mail singing as part of that. Anyway, this one comes to us from Andre V.
It's not fair how many French names you've had to deal with on this episode.
Actually, this is what makes it so terrible. This is actually a Russian name.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, I'm an idiot.
It's Andrii, to the point where I actually looked it up, tried to figure out how to pronounce it properly, because I wanted to just say Andre, but it's Andre. No, it's Andre. No, now I'm getting confused. Stop it with the names. Stop it. Anyway,
says Slawinski.
So Andre writes us, I'm in a camp that believes that game designers should play video games, but with years it becomes really hard for me to do that. There are many reasons for this, including my limited taste, an unapologetic desire for innovation, feeling of guilt when I spend my energy and time playing games instead of making games, and just a simple fact that 99.9% of games that are out there don't bring the joy to me like they used to. Unfortunately, I'm at a point where I finish only a couple games a year, and I can't even find the time and will to play games that are related to what I'm making. I know that it's not a huge problem for Mike, but he knows a lot of game designers, and maybe some of them discuss that problem with him, and he can share their tips on how to deal with this.
So this is interesting, because I think I saw this was a YouTube comment, wasn't it? Because I feel I've seen this question. I think I saw this on YouTube, and I was like, I hope we get to talk about this. So I'm going to tell a story. So I had a design lead called Terry, who was my first ever kind of design lead who I worked for. And I remember we were doing some stuff on a third-person shooter idea that we were working on as a team, and we were chatting about it, and very quickly in the conversation, I realized he'd not played Gears of War that had just come out. And I remember he said as much, and he asked me to kind of give him my opinions on it and what we could learn from it and all this. And I remember at the time thinking, gee, how can you be a designer who's not playing, all the big games as they come out? And then I aged. Because back then I was like, I guess at the time I was like 21, 22, and I was playing, I was buying 2 video games a week and playing them over the weekend, and just like, and yeah, it's something it's a discipline, and it's a weird thing because obviously everyone listening who doesn't make games is just going to go, you make video games for a living, you idiot. But it is, you do work quite long hours, and I totally can understand Andre's point about, feeling guilty if you're playing games rather than making them. I certainly have that instinct of like, well, I should just be making a video game rather than wasting my time playing them. For me,
I was such a jerk to our reviews editors. I was the worst because I was a news guy, right? So I worked for a video game site, and of course all my friends and family and whoever I told what I did for a living was just like, oh, so you sit around and play video games all day?
Sure.
It's like, no, I handle the news of video games. And then I would look at the reviews folks or anyone that got a review assigned, because I only did maybe 1 review a year, and I'd just be like, sure, I hate you all, because when they turn around and say, oh, you must sit around and play video games all day,
that's the guy they mean.
That's the person. It's the reviews editor. So always look on a website and look for the reviews editor. That's the jerk. I gets to play video games all day.
For me, it's a discipline thing. For me, it's something where now, I have to make sure that I play stuff. I'm fortunate in that some of the genres I really enjoy playing, so kind of open world games, action games, first person games, Western RPGs, like those are currently the popular genres, so that's good stuff that I'm playing because I want to, but I also make an effort to try and cross genres. Often, Alexander, you'll mention a game to me and I'll say, oh shit, I probably need to play that then, and then I'll go off and check that out. And it's important. I think it's important to be playing other people's games. I think not every game you play you're gonna think is a revelation, but often you'll find a little thing in a game that you realize, oh, that's really special. I could use something like that in my game. I used to do blog posts, and I got in lots of trouble because I would get quoted off them, but I used to do blog posts of kind of what you should steal from this game, and it was just looking at games that I was playing and things that were really interesting and clever in them. Of course, people saw that as me being plagiaristic or whatever, but like it's how my process works. I want to play stuff so I can get inspired and see things that I think work and find those little gems. And, frankly, I think always going into those games with humility and assuming that much cleverer people than you designed them is a good starting point for learning from them. So yeah, I my only thing I can say really is to kind of encourage you to keep playing. I think if you're working in a genre, you should have an idea of what the current genre expectations are. I think that's how you avoid making a silly mistake like putting the jump button on the wrong. I think I use that example way too often on this podcast, but just like.
But the reason you use that example is I've been there, I've seen that, I've covered the game time and time again, where someone is just bucking convention for the sake of doing that.
It's fine to buck convention, but you must do it knowingly. Like you, so something like so to use the jump button example, Mirror's Edge does not use the conventional jump button. The reason Mirror's Edge does not use the conventional jump button is because it needs you to have your thumb on the right thumbstick so you can be looking around. So it puts the jumps onto the triggers. Because you're not shooting guns, those triggers are now free, so they've moved stuff over. That is intelligent, smart design solution and makes a game where you are much more mobile in the sense that you can jump and look around at the same time. So it opens up a bunch of gameplay conversations. That is smart game design. The problem would be if the people who made Mirror's Edge didn't put the jump button on A because they didn't realise they were meant to put the jump button on A. It's always fine to be a punk and break a rule. That's great. That's how really cool stuff gets made. But you have to know what the rule is. You can't invent punk rock if you've not listened to glam rock. Like, you have to know the rules you're breaking and the kind of the paradigms that you're kind of bucking up against. Otherwise, you're just being ignorant, to put it bluntly. So I would encourage you to try and play stuff. There are other factors to this. Obviously games are expensive, so you can't play everything, and you can't put pressure on yourself to have to play everything. So being targeted in what you play is a good approach. I play a lot of demos. I play a lot of, if I can get my hands on a game, for a weekend from a friend, I will, just to try it out, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a full-on purchase in order to experience something. But yeah, I think being aware of what's out there, being aware of what games are, I think it's very easy to get kind of distracted by gaming culture, which is really interesting, and knowing kind of all the conversations that are going on around games is really interesting. But if you're just reading articles about BioShock Infinite and you didn't play BioShock Infinite, then there's only so much understanding you're going to be able to glean from that conversation. So I would always encourage people to keep playing. And yeah, sometimes it feels like a job, but it is a job. And none of us are down the mines. So we're not suffering. It's fine.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging the now verified @MikeBithell.
I don't even bring it up. It's nice when people do bring it up. I'm very proud.
Or @Slewinski, or
are you verified, Alexander?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and please, I could really use some positive reinforcement on whatever platforms you're hearing this show on, whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. I am Alexander Slewinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Stoker.